Join the OurGame Supporters Club at Patreon for €5 per month to get audio podcasts of the Hurling and Football Show and much more exclusive material. Just to rehash once more where we're at. Limerick number 1. I think it goes without saying they're going to stay at number 1. But
Yeah.
Galway have lost to Dublin. Waterford were beaten by Clare. Tipperary had a victory over Clare, a little bit contentious, of course. Kilkenny very good in their victory over Wexford as it went down the wire. With Cork there, who lost to Limerick but gave a good performance. Clare, one win and a good performance against Tip, and will obviously feel very hard done by. Wexford, they beat Laois very, very well, but then obviously left it behind them is how they'll probably feel it against Kilkenny. Dublin beat Antrim very, very well, and obviously Antrim lost to Dublin, and Laois took a pummeling as well. So let's go straight into this, and people get your comments in. Actually, we'll touch on one or two before we jump into it. Will Dublin up to top 5? Anyone for the Dubs in top 5? I'm getting carried away. Patrick Coleman.
I don't know if he is. It's hard. Like if you look at 9 has beaten 2 in our power rankings. Like they deserve a significant jump. Like
they certainly do, and I think we're going to have a little bit of consternation as this goes on. We tend to. Patrick Coleman, Kilkenny 1, Limerick 2, Tip 3, Dublin 4, Clare 5, Galway, Cork 6, Wexford, Galway down at 8, Waterford down at 9, Antrim, based on the way they played the last 2 weeks, at 10, and hasn't even bothered putting Laois in there. Will says Cork have lost a good few titles. Oh, sorry, that was an earlier comment. Mega JW99, good shout, Pat RE rankings. Agree, caveat for Tipperary, should be number 3, Tip, plus James Owens. A little bit of a smart comment there as well. So we're agreed on Limerick number 1, even though I think we have seen signs of a small bit of fallibility over the course of the league and that Cork game. I think Cork did quite well, and they showed a couple of times that you can run through them. Maybe Limerick will get better, but there are a couple of signs.
I'd agree with you. Yeah, and even the relief kind of coming out of Kylie the other day, and even Kinnerk, I think they realised that was a big challenge, and they were happy with the way they came through it. Hadn't been for the 2 goals before half time, it would have been even more interesting. As we said on Monday, if Owen Cadigan had hit that point and maybe cut it down to 3, could have gotten very, very tense down the home straight. But I don't think there's anything to suggest that they're not the top team anymore. And just looking through it, like, I'll agree with you on 1, Limerick, and I agree with you on 10, Antrim, and 11, Laois. But I don't know if there'll be much agreement from 2 to 9.
Yeah, this is it. So, right. Okay, so obviously...
Who's the second best team? Like, who is the second best team in the country right now?
Oh, man. I mean, Kilkenny could have lost in normal time. And yes, you could make a fair... like, Wexford are probably going to drop here, right? So Kilkenny have to go up. But Kilkenny could very easily have lost that game. And, like, how harshly do we judge Waterford? They were beaten by Clare, who many fancied as... we had them well down the list when we were doing our rankings initially. We had Clare down at 7th. But it was half of the Waterford team. Some of those players, they may get back, some they mightn't. Kilkenny straight away into number 1 and 2 for Verney. Anyways, and he added, and Offaly at 3. Limerick will only get better with games. I haven't seen anything to challenge them. Brian White, Limerick 1, Tip 2, Kilkenny 3, Galway 4, Clare 5, Cork 6, Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, Antrim, Laois. Okay, so we're going to go...
Shane, I think a key question here is, do you think that Galway will still have a big impact in this championship?
I think they can. They looked very, very poor, but sometimes with a manager, you need to learn the hard way. And I've said this about Tipperary in the past, that you don't change the team to the way you should change it until you learn out there when everyone is watching and it's really badly exposed the way that you selected your team. I think Dahi Burke is probably going to go back to full-back. I can fully see why you'd have him at centre-back, absolutely fully. But you know that teams are going to try to avoid hitting the centre-back. So the opposition is always going to try and avoid hitting whoever the number 6 is, because they're generally a really good player. Like Pádraig Walsh got into the Wexford game at times, but they did a great job of avoiding him too, because the whole idea is we can't let the centre-back / sweeper take over the game. So if Dahi Burke goes back to number 3, whoever they're playing against will try and target the number 3 or get the ball into their most dangerous forward, who generally is the number 14. So I think that brings Dahi Burke back in, and his importance is we start to see it again. Maybe they'll put Grode McInerney out centre back. Maybe they won't have him there at all. But Pádraig Mannion and Fintan Burke will obviously be out there also. And, they have some good players there and options for the half back line. Aidan Hart can also come in. Joseph Cooney isn't going to go into full forward again. I think that lesson, they've tried that. A guy that they actually played full back last year when he was man marking TJ Reid, that's not going to happen again. Brian Concannon, he was out of this game altogether against Dublin. Adrian Toohey was wing forward. Maybe Concannon goes out wing forward. Remember how good he was against Limerick last year when he went out there. Like, if they put their pieces back in the way that get the most out of their team, and it's easy to say it for us, isn't it? But I mean, we have to reflect on what went wrong and point to it and say, I don't know if Adrian Toohey at wing forward is the way to go. I don't know if Joe Canning, obviously he moves his position, but like being out midfield works. Sean Loftus was corner back last year and now he's midfield. I mean, they just need to settle the team. If they get one win and get their confidence up, I think Galway are still right up there. Like, look at some of the teams that we're going to match them against. We're going to be talking about, can Galway beat Tipperary? Yeah, Galway can always beat Tipperary. There's generally just a pocket of ball between them. Can Galway beat Waterford? Absolutely. Can Galway beat Kilkenny? They definitely can beat them. Whether there's still that psychological thing is another question. Some of the score lines they put up in the league were brilliant. I mean, what does it matter? But they still did that. Over the last 10 years, is there a more consistent team in the championship than Galway? Probably not. Can they beat Cork? Yeah. Can they beat Clare? Yeah. Can they beat Wexford? Absolutely. Hammered them last year. Obviously, they lost to Dublin. Do we now put Dublin ahead of Galway just on the basis of that?
I don't know. I was, as I said, I was chatting to Cyril Farrell, and we talk about inconsistencies in Galway, and I described them as, before, how they were kind of nearly the Arsenal of hurling, and he just said, to be fair to that bunch, they never did that before. That panel never did that. Back the time that could have happened, but not with this squad, to be fair. Like, how overly harsh are we going to be on Galway? Like, I think we'd be foolish to leave them outside the top 5. I do. I think I actually probably think they're still ahead of Dublin. Are
they ahead of Tip?
No. Oh God, no. No.
But like, on second viewing, I was more impressed by Tipperary than I was in first viewing. There's no doubt that the 2-4 to 2 points run that Tipperary had during the black card, that completely changed the game. But I also think that Clare imploded. Other teams don't implode when they go down to 14 men. And as I said to you the other day, oh yeah, it was a terrible one, and the players probably in disbelief and all this kind of stuff. And you hear people saying that black card would affect the team and that penalty would affect the team more than another one would. But I don't know. I think Limerick didn't expect Peter Casey to be shown the line for his foul on Conor Cahalane that ended up with a penalty. I know they saved it and all that, and that probably kind of kicked them on, and they were able to do pretty well during that period of play when they were down to 14 men. But I wouldn't, if I was a Clare man, I wouldn't be looking to make excuse for the team withdrawing that much and allowing Tipperary to play the ball around them. In every hurling match, you're going to face unexpected consequences and you have to learn to deal with them. Surely that's the whole thing. So we can't just give Clare a pass. When it was put up to them, when they were in the depths of despair, when things went against them, they folded up the tents for a long period of that game.
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure.
You're going to give them a pass on that?
I don't give them a pass. I think at least they came with a finish at the end. They didn't. If they folded up the tents, they would have been beaten by 10 or 12 points in the whole. That would have just been
that was hard.
The end of the game. Yeah, I think
that was a little hard.
Yeah, at least they finished. I think they finished with a bit of a flourish. I agree with what you're saying. If they'd been beaten by 10 or 12, it'd be a disaster, and they would have said, "Okay, that was the end of the game." And you think, fair enough, it was a massive moment in the game, but they shouldn't have just, waved the white flag. They didn't wave the white flag, in my opinion. So, and they have a championship game, a championship win under their belt, which I think is big. So I think Clare were 7 the last time. That they probably have to be moving up. Well, saying that, there's a lot of teams in around there, so I'm not sure who's going to be moving up. But we probably need to sort out. Are you looking at Kilkenny and Tip 2 or 3, vice versa?
I think what Kilkenny had to come through to win that game pushes them really far up here.
Yeah.
Tipperary won, and there's contentious circumstances, and Clare are rightly aggrieved. Now, however, about the way that they dealt with the black card in that period, and Mega JW has kind of backed me up. Fair point, Shane, RE sin binning, control the controllables, look at Limerick and Kilkenny reactions to sin binning versus Clare. Right, okay.
Yeah, the only thing is, Shane, I would say, there's a difference between a sin binning that's, a 50-50 or, an 80-20 in Owen Murphy's case, and an absolutely ridiculous sin bin, and that does take a while to overcome. But I understand what you're saying.
Like when a decision goes against you in a match, or like a soft goal, or a referee gives away a poor penalty and stuff do you on the field panic?
No, but it's a bit different when it's a foul that should be a yellow card and it's a penalty. You lose a goal and you lose a man. But I understand what you're saying. At least they came back and finished with somewhat of a flourish. But to me, based on the fact that Kilkenny probably could have lost the game in normal time and how convincingly they won the game by full time, with Walter Welch probably coming back to himself, with Owen Cody maybe coming of age, with TJ Reid even still finishing strong, and the fact, I think probably for me, I'd say Kilkenny are probably two, probably closely followed by Tip, I would say, because I wasn't blown away by Tip against Clare, but they did what they had to do, and I do think they'll improve. But you'd be hard pressed probably to put Tip 2 based on what you saw last weekend.
No, I couldn't. I wouldn't do it. Like, I still think Tipperary, if they meet Kilkenny in Championship, I mean, if you go on the last two games, which were obviously the All-Ireland finals 2016 and 19, Tipperary won both of those comprehensively, and they haven't met in the Championship since. So it's a tough one. It is a tough one to call there. I think more people would have had Tipperary ahead of Kilkenny before this, but just the fact that Kilkenny are bringing through players now, you can see, like you and I were concerned about where Kilkenny were going and where they'd be in the next year or two. But like
I still will be, Shane, like to some extent. Like,
but they had 15 scores in that game. What does that do for the panel? Like, training the next kind of week or two, they're going to be absolutely buzzing. They're coming into a Leinster final against Dublin. No matter what happens, Kilkenny are going to be in that game coming down the stretch. Even if Dublin win the game, I don't think they have the scoring power to pull away. And I think most people would favour Kilkenny going into this. So if they win a Leinster title, back-to-back Leinster titles, you know, Owen Cody coming through, TJ Reid still going to be 34 later this year, still playing brilliant stuff. John Donnelly couldn't even get in the team, and you and I have rated him so highly. Adrian Mullen, a young hurler of the year in the past, maybe he'll kick on again. James Bergen, he's starting to step up a little bit. Michael Carey's starting to get a bit of game time. James Maher, who was dropped off the panel last year, he was brought in when Lee Chin was doing a bit of damage, so his athleticism was brought in, and he also scored a couple of points. So they've not like Martin Keown in there as well. He's beginning to establish himself more and more. There's a lot of reasons why you'd feel very much like Kilkenny are starting to move in that direction, and Tip have a little bit more to prove before you can think, right, they're kicking on to another level, rather than it's older players. And Tipperary, no matter what they do this year, next year they'll probably take a little step back, and the following year they'll take a little step back. So we I think we're nearly agree. Like, if Tip meet Kilkenny this year, I think Tip will win. But it's just, I think the trajectories might be going slightly differently.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that, to be honest with you. But I'd say Kilkenny probably have a better passage, we'd say, to an All-Ireland semi-final, a more likely passage, shall we say.
Yeah, and Joe Butler saying John Donnelly had an injury. He did come in the game. So, Jesus, I miss Cyril Farrell as well. His sentences that last a full minute without taking a breath. And to be fair, interrupting himself 3 or 4 times in the middle of it. But,
I love that too, because I said it to Shane about punditry. There's a fine balance between analysis and entertainment, and I think when you find that balance, I think someone like Cyril is great. I used to love him on co-commentary in particular. You know, they call him Santi in college and all this kind of crack.
Yeah, as Martin Costello says here, as a Kilkenny man, as happy as I am with the win, which was huge, still worried about our defence against the likes of the forwards that Tip and Galway have. I mean, Galway, as they showed last year, they weren't able to make it pay. Mark Corcoran, if Dublin play Galway again in the All-Ireland series, the money would be on Galway. Galway would be back, and they have the class. Liam O'Callaghan, Leitrim Antrim shouldn't have to play a relegation match for next year. Leinster should be 2 groups of 4, and Mark Corcoran says that he agrees with Liam. Right, we're going to have to start trying to pare this thing down here. I do actually, the more I think about it, I do think Tipperary would beat Kilkenny and would be able to expose that backline if it came to a championship match here. So you obviously talked me down, and a few comments came in talking me down, having Waterford ahead of Tipperary, Waterford at 3, Tip 4 before the championship. I feel like Tipperary would beat Kilkenny when it comes down to a Croke Park latter end of the championship. So are you saying that you think Kilkenny would beat Tipperary later in the championship?
No, I actually don't. I don't think that. I do think if they met, I think Tipperary would beat them. But I just think based on Kilkenny in a Leinster final, which I think they'll win, Tipperary in a Munster final, which I think they won't win. So I think Kilkenny will be in an All-Ireland semi-final. In my head, I think that's almost not guaranteed, but I think there's a far better chance I will tell Cyril that he's badly missed. Don't worry, I will. He's actually coming down to Birr to take a training session next week with a future stars hurling company. He's coming down for an hour, so I must try and get that recorded and play it out for everyone because I'm sure there'll be some gems in there. But I do think Kilkenny will be in an All-Ireland semi-final, and I'm not guaranteed that Tip will be in the All-Ireland semi-final because I think they'll be coming in the back door. So I think potentially, if you want to put Tip before Kilkenny, I think there's a fair chance that Kilkenny will get further in the championship than Tipperary will, just as a basis of who they're playing.
And that's part of the thing you're weighing up here. There's a load of different factors. Where are they going? Where are they coming from? What results that they had? What are the chances of them if they played each other? Who'll get further in the championship?
Now, they could meet in an All-Ireland semi-final if Tip are beaten in Munster and Kilkenny win Leinster.
Oh, that'll put the cat among the pigeons.
Yeah, that's. But I would stand over Kilkenny too. Because I just think it's with the way the draw will work out. I think they're far more it's far more favourable for them. And if they win Leinster, I know we're predicting results here, but that's the nature of it. I think they'll be avoiding Limerick potentially until an All-Ireland final.
But potentially Tipperary, even if whether they win or lose against Limerick, and most people will say the Treaty would win that game, they should learn an awful lot about themselves in that game. Munster, generally over the last number of years, which is proven by the amount of All-Ireland winners coming from that province, has been a tougher road. So Tipperary would possibly know more about themselves after that Limerick game than Kilkenny will know about their team and where their flaws are.
Fair point. Listen, you're looking at a jump of Kilkenny from 5 to 2, or you're looking at a jump of Tipperary from 4 to 2 from the previous power rankings. I think you can justify both based on 2 and 3 totally underperforming. So I think it's a coin toss for either of them, and I won't fight you over either of them. I would prefer to have Kilkenny number 2, just because I think they're guaranteed. I think in my head anyway, I think they're guaranteed to get longer in this championship and will play less games, and so less chances of being knocked out. But I won't fight with you over 2 and 3.
Yeah, I think because Kilkenny are in a position to get further in the championship, I would be inclined to give them number 2 here, but with the massive caveat that if they both had the same path, I think Tipperary will go further, and if they meet in the championship, I think Tipperary will win it. So get your comments in and let us know if you think
I go along with that, Shane. Not often I agree with you, but I would go along with that. I do think if they meet, I do think Tipperary would have too much for them, particularly up front. And if they had the same path, I would have Tip number 2 ahead of Kilkenny.
I'd have Galway down at number 4. I still think they can come back. Yes, they had a poor performance against Dublin. The arrogance to go from goals from the very get-go to try and bury the Dubs, it came against them, picking lads in the wrong positions. I think they'll be back, and I think they'll make a right fist of it yet.
I'd agree with you. I think they've too much class. I'd have them marginally ahead of Dublin. I'd probably have Galway 4, Dublin 5. The thing about Dublin is at the moment is, and we talked about it off air, with the way the year is going, would you be that surprised if Dublin somehow ended up in an All-Ireland final? I know I'm saying I think Kilkenny will win Leinster, and they do. Would I be really surprised if they won Leinster? No, I wouldn't really be, to be honest with you. Then they're potentially avoiding Limerick until an All-Ireland, they're on the other side of the draw. It could be just that type of a year where they catch fire, and they were threatening to catch fire in 2019. Didn't happen. I know you and me both thought they'd really hop off Tipperary in an All-Ireland quarter-final if they'd gotten through that Laois game. They didn't. Maybe this will be the year for something like that, something strange to happen that we maybe just didn't foresee. But I'd have Galway 4. I still think they'll bounce back. I think you'd be so foolish to write them off, and so foolish to write this team off. Obviously All-Ireland champions in 17, beaten finalists in 18. Knocked out in the round robin 19, All-Ireland semi-finalists last year, the team that put it up to Limerick the most. And just a really good league behind them. Just too much class. There's no way that many guys will be that flat the next day. Conor Whelan was really the only guy from 8 to 15 that really produced. And, there's just too many lads can fill the breach the next day. And I refuse to write them off.
Yeah, and a comment coming in here from Joseph Nash. Totally disagree. Tip would not be Kilkenny. Look at the energy of Kilkenny. Energy is not something you would say about Tip. Wexford were near full tilt and Kilkenny still lost. I think both teams were at full tilt. But you can say what you like about Tipperary, but they beat a Clare team that had obviously knocked out Waterford from the Munster Championship the week before. And I know there's little factors here, there, and the black card and all that kind of stuff. So
too much class up front for Tip, in my view. I think they'd hurt them. I think they'd hurt them too much on the scoreboard if Tip were able to tie down TJ Reid to some extent, which they did in the 16 finals and they did in the 19 finals as well. I just don't know if they'd have enough of a spread of scores outside of him, whereas Tip have, any amount of spread of scores. I'd put it to you this way: Limerick could kill Tip physically and pace wise. I don't think Kilkenny could do that to them, and they haven't in recent years.
I have to be honest, I want to see Kilkenny against Limerick in the championship at some stage this year, because this will really test out where Kilkenny are at, and there's going to be, if Limerick wanted revenge on any team in the entire championship, they've beaten everyone up and down the field, but they haven't beaten Kilkenny, not this iteration. Obviously they beat them in the 2018 All-Ireland quarter-final in Thurles, but I think they want revenge there, and I'd love to see that matchup. Do you know what? If you wanted to make a case for Galway to be ahead of Tipperary, I wouldn't necessarily massively argue with you. Losing to Dublin means that they have to be beneath them. But Tipperary have a lot of question marks throughout the spine of the team. Barry Hogan came and goes, did absolutely fine, no problem there. But he's displacing his cousin Brian Hogan, who's an All-Star from a couple of years ago. So obviously that's a position in a little bit of flux at the moment. And Liam Sheedy might say he's made his mind up, but obviously that's a change at the moment. Paddy Maher, not sure he's looking too comfortable at full back, had a lot of slips in that last game. The midfield, Noel McGrath taken off after something like 48 minutes. He is a brilliant player, no doubt about it. But when has Liam Sheedy taken him off after 48 minutes, unless he's just not moving well at all, which was the case last year after such a long club campaign. But, he's not hopping off the sod at the moment. John McGrath played full forward, obviously very proven player, but completely cleaned out by Paul Flanagan in that first half. There's a lot of question mark, and Seamus Callanan isn't fully right yet. He's still trying to get his sharpness back. He scored 1-1, fluky goal, obviously, set up, I think, 5 scoring chances. But there's a lot of things with Tipperary that aren't right just yet, and that's why I could nearly accept a case for Galway being ahead of them. I think Cork could beat Tipperary if they meet. I'm not sure if anyone else could. I think other teams could push them hard, but I could see a case, but I'm still just about keeping Tip at 3. But with a huge scope for improvement, and in a ways, flaws in that team.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you there, and I think that's what makes it so interesting from 2 to 9, is that you literally think a team, Cork, which could be 7 or 8 in our rankings, could beat the second ranked 2 team or ranked 3 team. That's the way it is, but some of it is on potential and not what we've actually seen over the last 18 months. In fairness to Tip were All-Ireland champions in 2019. Didn't maybe defended unbelievably well last year, but still beat Cork in Championship last year and still went down to Galway by a score, having lost a man with 15 or 20 minutes to go. So I think they have enough credit. I think they have enough credit in the bank there. I'd have Galway just 4 probably behind Tip. But I'd love to see them two meet at some stage, and that could well happen in All-Ireland quarter-final.
What do you make of this topic about Tipperary getting decisions? Richie Power tweeted after the match the other day that it's an awful pity that the headlines and topic of conversation this morning is about officials after a great weekend at GA. Obviously, this is to do with the black card penalty against Clare. It's not the first deplorable decision Mr. Owens has made in recent seasons, but more notable, both decisions in favour of Tipperary. What do you make of that comment?
I said it to you on the Monday show. The ghost goal, the Richie Hogan red card, and that one last Sunday. They are 3 decisions that went Tip's way.
But they're not even out. Look at Tipperary. There was the Jake Morris goal against Wexford in the 2019 All-Ireland semi-final. That went against Tipperary. The
Cathal Barrett sending off last year, yeah.
There are instances as well. I'm sure there's plenty other ones that I'm not thinking about. 2009 All-Ireland final as well, which Richie Power, of course, was involved in.
Good to know that you've let that go 12 years later.
Hey, do you think Cathal Barrett, at this stage, ever since that red card to Richie Hogan, do you think Cathal Barrett is getting done by referees to some degree, or getting more focused than is actually required? This is something that came up in Tipcast. I was talking to Shane Brophy about. What do you think? Do you think I think that referees are looking to give him yellow cards very early.
I think that's it's I don't know if these are conversations that happen amongst referees or whether they're on forums or listening to things or whatever, but there are definitely certain players that are treated differently. I'll put it this way: Sean Finn would be treated completely differently than Cathal Barrett.
because Sean Finn would have the image of being, and in fairness, it's a fairly accurate image of being quite a clean defender, whereas Barrett is a lot more robust, a lot more in your face, a lot more old school. That shouldn't mean that he's treated any differently, though, just because he plays like most top players play on the borderline anyway. But it seems like Barrett doesn't have to do much probably to pick up a card. There are players like that. There are players like that at club level as well, who if they give away a foul, they'll be given a yellow card, whereas someone else mightn't even get a tick for it. That's just the nature of it. I suppose it's not right, but reputations do precede some guys, and there's almost this thing in the back of referees' heads that it's Barrett or whatever, he deserves a yellow. Whereas if it's Finn, he probably doesn't get a yellow. It's wrong, but that seems to be just the way it is. I suppose that's when that's the human element of probably refereeing a lot of the time and not being able to take past experiences out of your head. Like someone gives away a foul, they're judged on that foul and that foul alone, not whether they were sent off 2 years ago or whatever.
So now we're going to move on to number 5 in the power rankings, and you kind of mentioned Dublin there provisionally, but I wonder, would Cork have something to say about that? Clare have obviously done pretty well in the last few years, Waterford, even Wexford. So I don't know if it's just as simple as saying Dublin here. They had a brilliant win over Galway. They're into a Leinster final. But Cork hammered them last year. And I think the Dublin team has changed and the setup has changed a little bit since that game. But Wexford would probably feel we've done pretty good against Dublin the last few years. Waterford have obviously got further in the championship more often in recent times. So I'd nearly think that if Waterford can get their injury situation right here, that Waterford would be next in line.
Yeah, well, obviously, I had Waterford at 3 the last time, and I do think they have serious scope. They need everyone. I thought they'd still get over Clare, minus Prunty and Barron. They obviously didn't, but sorry. It's sometimes when comments come up and they're kind of half slating you, I find it very hard to stay concentrated. So I'm just going to read it out. If Shane wants to bring up 2009, he should remember 2014. Barry Kelly gave a soft free for tip against Brian Hogan, and only for Hawkeye, KK would have lost the Ireland or the All Ireland, I'm sure it is, which is an interesting comment there as well. I do think Waterford have massive scope. I thought they'd beat Clare, and if I'm honest, I thought they'd beat Tip as well. Hasn't worked out that way. They're going to have 3 weeks to regroup. Prunty should be back. Jamie Barron should be back. That means they'd have 10 to 11 of last year's All Ireland winning team. I do think there's a kick in them, and I do think Liam Cattle's history should suggest that there's a kick in them as well. But that's a pure quagmire there from 5 to 9. Like the only thing I'd say about Dublin is that they've proven it. Like this year, they swatted Antrim aside like they should have had, and they won pulling up against a Galway side that we rate so highly. Whereas Waterford is probably recently enough too. Munster final last year, All Ireland final last year, massive performance against Kilkenny, good finish to the league. But there's doubts about them now. There's doubts about them coming in. You're not 100% sure what you're going to get in the qualifiers, where it looks like with Dublin now that they're playing to a high level and will be able to continue their graph for the rest of the year.
Yeah, but Clare beat them and scored 34 points on them in Parnell Park. Shane O'Donnell is to come back in the team, hopefully. Obviously, he had a concussion, so you'd hope he's okay. Aaron Fitzgerald is to come back. Maybe David McInerney will be fit to start the next day. There's actually kind of scope for improvement in this Clare team also. I'd make a fair case that Dublin will probably get further in the championship this year than Clare, depending on the draw, obviously. But Dublin will go further. But if they met in championship at Croke Park, I think I'd nearly give Clare the nudge there.
Yeah, interesting. Where do Cork come into the mix then as well? Cork were far from disgraced against Limerick the other day, and had it not been for the 2 goals,
Croker should suit them too.
Yeah, Croker should definitely suit them as well if they can get there. They're going to have to get there. I think this is what makes the draw on Monday so interesting. It's going to throw up some absolute doozies of games. Really. I would still have Dublin marginally at 5 just on what we've actually seen this year. But you're talking about it's that close. You're talking about putting 2 teams at 5 and 1 at 7, if you know what I mean. That's how close we're looking. Obviously, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But
Yeah, I do, and I do agree with Will. Like that's a fact, and I think you could probably even go down to number 9, even on that, even closer. Like, because Dublin were number 9, and Dublin have beaten a number 2 team. Clare were number 7, and they beat a number 3 team in Waterford. So, like, they are quite interchangeable enough, but we're going to have to nail our colours to the mast.
We are. I like where Clare are going. I know I obviously kind of talked about them fading when they got that black card, but I really like. We all have to hold our hands up and say John Connon has worked out pretty well at centre back. You and I have been talking about Cathal Malone has been very good for a couple of years. Colm Galvin is beginning to get into games a little bit more after his extended breakthrough injury. Aaron Shanahan, if only he could add a bit more finishing class into the great approach work he does. Tony Kelly's the best player in the country. Aidan McCarthy, I think he was out of it against Tip for long spells, and I'm not just talking about the black card, but he's got potential. Ryan Taylor's really settling down. I'd be looking to, I think Cork would beat Clare, but I think Clare would be next in my list. I think Cork would beat both Clare and Dublin.
You think Cork would beat both of them?
Yeah.
Based on last year's championship performance, you definitely have something to go on there. I do think it's a different Dublin side. I think it's a different Dublin side this year. I think they're far better organised, and there's a far more solid look to their team now. Yeah.
Look, I'm going Cork, Clare, Dublin. Then you're looking at.
Have Cork really done enough to be number 5?
It's just the sort of. So some of this is gut. And I mean, this whole power ranking things is based on some of what we've definitely seen and know how we think will go as the season goes on. The draw will obviously probably even change how we look at this. But it's just in my gut, I think Cork are going in the right direction. I think Waterford will still struggle for the rest of the year because I don't know if they have the playing personnel because of all the injuries and stuff like that. I still think that Dublin's their lack of scores probably up front. I'm not sure that they'll keep teams to 114 every single day they go out. I think Kilkenny, if Owen O'Donnell is injured, and maybe he's out for the season after that hamstring injury, I'm not sure. But if he's out, I think Kilkenny win that game. If he's in, I think Dublin have a right good chance. But I kind of put Dublin down. We had Dublin at 9 last day. They obviously have to jump up a little bit. I think Clare would beat Dublin. I think Cork would beat Dublin in the championship. And look, obviously everyone knows that I push hard for Dublin. I want to see them do well. But obviously I mean it if I'm saying that. But I put Dublin ahead of Watford at the moment. And I'd also put Clare ahead of Watford based on this season now, where they're going this year. And I think Cork would beat Watford the way things are going this season.
Are you putting Wexford down at 9 then?
I think I am, yeah. Because who do you put Wexford ahead of there? Like, they could have beaten Kilkenny, and arguably should have. And maybe, who knows? Maybe that Hawkeye call was actually wrong. The one at the end that Owen Murphy touched down, but was given as a point for Liam Ryan. But instead, Kieran MacDonald flicked it into the net. Now,
that's really but that's really something that they're going to have to look at. Like whether it was. I know it shows. Like, it showed that the ball went 6 feet behind the goals, and it definitely didn't. Like, so that's. Like with the Brian Hogan thing and even, Owen Murphy the other day, it's definitely something they're going to have to get solved. I'll put it this way, Shane. I don't think Wexford will bounce back in the qualifiers.
Neither do I. And I think the effect of bringing players back on who were clearly not ready to continue playing is going to have a bad effect on the panel. And it just...
I think partly that will have a bad effect. And I think energy-wise, they could be gone now. They put everything into that first 70 minutes and did nothing left in extra time. Very, very similar to that Tip game in 2019. We saw how long it took them to overcome that. So I think the draw would have to be favourable to them, and by favourable I mean they'd have to get the winners of Antrim and Laois. Yeah. And I'm happy enough with Wexford at 9. So you're just looking at 5, 6, 7, 8 then.
Yeah, and just to go through a few comments, this is Adrian McGrath talking about Wexford. Wexford went short because that's how they're being coached. They played Clare and Limerick in challenges in the last few weeks, and everything was lots of players back, short puckouts, run the ball up, and it's tense at times to watch how Wexford do it. It's brave, and it's the same with Cork as well. They're obviously trying to do things a little bit differently, and what's the point in losing the same old way? We've had that conversation before. Mega JW, Sean Finn is a sleek F1 car, Cathal Bard a diesel guzzling muscle car, both excellent in different ways.
Big fan of that analogy now. Big fan of that, yeah.
Yeah, Will feels that Ryan O'Dwyer used to get cards for nothing. has any explanation.
I'm not sure about that. He was a very, very robust player. I think that's different. He did put himself in positions where he was likely to get cards with putting his head and putting his arms in as well. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he got yellow cards or red cards for nothing now.
Yeah, I think Ryan O'Dwyer's kind of like his everyday was playing on the edge, and if he wasn't, well then look.
If he didn't have blood on him by the end of the match, there was something wrong. Like
if he didn't have blood and a yellow card, did he play at all? You know what I mean, that in the right way. So this is my ranking, right? So this is what I've kind of landed on, and let me know, and obviously get your comments in before we finish up in a minute. Limerick 1, Kilkenny 2, Tip 3, Galway 4, Cork, Clare, Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, and then Antrim Laois.
I think you've been a small bit harsh on Dublin.
Well, they've jumped up a couple of places here.
They have, yeah, but they're only token places they've jumped up. Like they've jumped from 9 to 7. Like,
so where do you want them?
I want them 5. I want them ahead of Cork.
Will they beat Cork in Championship?
I think they'll get further than Cork in the Championship.
How? Like, yeah, okay. So they're
guaranteed an All-Ireland quarter final now. Cork are not.
Yeah, but...
And they beat the second best team in the country. Cork haven't won a championship game this year. Cork haven't beaten anybody. Beat Dublin in championship last year, obviously. They were beaten well by Waterford. And they were... Who did they lose to last year after? They were beaten by Tipperary. They had an indifferent league.
So do you want Cork?
I know. Listen,
what about Clare?
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying about Cork. And there would be that... I would have that, what I call nearly a worry with Cork, that, you know, they could produce something. But I still haven't seen enough yet.
Okay, Patrick Coleman says when the 1A teams played 1B, 1A lost to Clare against Waterford, Dublin lost to Dublin beat Galway, and then Tip, obviously, they were the 1A team that beat a 1B side. So he's also added in, Andrew Sullivan has added in, he'd have the order as Clare, Cork, Waterford, Dublin, Wexford. So that's pushing Dublin back down again. So would
Andrew's a big Clare fan. He had Clare to win the All-Ireland in 2019, I think, and he couldn't see past anybody else.
So would you have Dublin ahead of Clare?
I'm happy with Dublin, Clare 5 and 6, either or.
And then Cork below both of them, but ahead of Waterford and Wexford.
Yeah, at the moment, yeah. Well,
so Dublin...
No, do you know what? No, I wouldn't have Cork ahead of Waterford.
No?
I wouldn't have Cork ahead of Waterford. I'm not
sure.
But
who's going to go further this season? This was your criteria.
Yeah, no, I still think Waterford could go further than Cork this year. And they beat them comprehensively in Championship last year as well. And were the All-Ireland finalists last year, which I don't think we should forget.
Yeah, I just feel that Cork are on that upward trajectory, which is the whole reason that I've put Kilkenny ahead of Tipperary here. That I'd be going against my own kind of measuring system.
Yeah, I am reticent to let a team that I pushed for to be number 3 fall back to 8 at this stage. But yeah, I would still have Waterford ahead of Cork. But are you happy with Dublin, Clare 5 and 6 either or?
I want Cork. You
want Cork? Yeah, Jesus, right.
So Dublin, Cork, Clare, then Waterford. You have to have Clare ahead of Waterford, even though Waterford were down players.
No, they do. No, Clare do have to be ahead of Waterford. I'd agree with you.
Okay, so that's it then. Mark Corcoran.
What's it?
Vernie's right about Cork. Cork are in year 1 of a game plan. Dublin is in year 3 and getting it right. Yeah, I still think Cork are moving in that right direction. So at the moment, right, give you one last chance to jump in here. Limerick, Kilkenny, Tip, Galway, Dublin, Cork, Clare, Waterford, Wexford, Antrim Laois.
Yeah, I'm not happy with the fact that Clare are still in the same position as they were starting off.
So, but like, do you honestly think they'd beat Cork in the championship this year?
Clare?
Yeah.
I don't know.
They're both in the qualifiers then.
Yeah, I don't know.
I do.
I'm not sure. No, I do. Yeah, Jenny Mac. It's not simple. I think this is the best qualifiers we're ever going to have, I'd say.
Oh, it's going to be brilliant. It's going to be brilliant. Look, I think we're going to stick with that.
What if Waterford fallen to number 8?
They've fallen to number 8 from 3.
Jenny, I'm not happy with that now, but listen. I don't know. No, I'm not happy with Waterford at 8. I'm not happy with Cork's position, being honest. Not happy with Cork. Not happy with Cork.
Cork has stayed in the same spot. Cork performed well enough despite their best player not really having a poor game, and their puck out imploding. They haven't even moved position against the best team in the country.
Okay. Dublin 5, Cork 6, Clare 7. Is it?
Yeah.
Cork and Clare have stayed in the same positions. I think it's a bit harsher on Clare, but you kind of can't have it everywhere. I'll go with that. Wexford at 9, is it? Wexford at 9, Waterford at 8.
Yeah, and then Antrim Leash. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it. Another hurling show in the can. Let us know what you think of that. Get your comments in, and we'll touch on them again the next day. So enjoy the hurling weekend coming up. Take it easy, Michael.
Cheers, Shane.
Join the OurGame Supporters Club at Patreon for €5 per month to get audio podcasts of the Hurling and Football show and much more exclusive material.